All right. Great. So just so everyone knows, we are recording and are live on YouTube. And for future reference, you can look back on these and find them on our City of Eugene Transportation website or on the YouTube channel. Reminder, if anyone would like to make a comment, we do have about half a dozen attendees. And if any of you would like to make a public comment, we'll have that coming up on the agenda here in just a moment. You can raise your hand. Currently, I have Webb in the queue to make a comment. Let's see. And yes, if you are observing, then you don't show up. This is, we'll bring you in to make a comment via audio, but only the ATC members and staff show up on as the panelists. We do this as a webinar, so it's different than a Zoom meeting. So there are panelists and attendees. Our agenda this evening, let me put this back up here really quick, and then we can jump in and I'll hand it over to the whoever's facilitating tonight. But I just wanted to remind people that I can bring you on to allow you to talk, and then I'll remove you. If you have questions and comments throughout, I will be monitoring those behind the scenes, and we'll feed those to the ATC members for clarity. If there's time on the agenda after they make their comments or questions, then we'll take comments or questions from any attendees. And here's our agenda. And I will then hand this over. Let's see, I assume that's showing up. I seem to lose my video panel. There we go. So who is facilitating this evening? Who's the chair or co-chair who's going to facilitate?
I assume that would be me because I'm not seeing Bob on the list.
Ah, yes, I don't see
attendees,
well.
so I guess it's me again.
Okay. We'll remind him he's got 2 next time.
I think it's more than 2, but that's okay.
All right. So I think I've got enough of the coordination pieces out. Looks like we're all set up. And so I will take public comment pieces and then hand it over to you, Robbie, to run us through the regular agenda. Sound good?
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay. Great. So I'll stop that. And then I'll bring our first public comment on. So Webb, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Committee members, Lee, Shane, thank you very much for listening to my comments, questions actually this evening. I attended several meetings ago a session where one of the items that was discussed was gaps in the current sidewalk system, especially outside of downtown. I live over near Westmoreland, and we have quite a few side streets here where a sidewalk will literally run the length of one property, stop for 2 properties, and then start up again for another property, and then stop again. Results of which are that we have school children walking in the middle of a street that has 30 miles an hour automobile traffic on it, which is something that's a little bit away from goodness. I had 2 questions of the committee at the time. The first was, can we not get some portion of the street funding to be allocated to filling in those gaps? The second question was something along the lines of who do we report pedestrian problems and issues to Public Works Maintenance is probably not the appropriate entity, especially since this involves multiple things, including planning, capital improvement, etc. So anyhow, those two got pushed out to you guys 2 meetings ago. At that time, I was told that 2 people from the committee would reach out to me independently through email. That never happened. I was told I would get a formal response from the city. That never happened. At this point, my question to you guys is, what's happening? And at this point, I'll leave it to the committee and to Lee and to Shane and see what's going on. That is the conclusion of my testimony.
Great, thanks. Lee, do you want to respond to that one?
Or Reed, I think Reed can respond about the pavement bond measure funds and how that's working. There isn't a dedicated funding source for sidewalk infill. That would be a very expensive program. In regards to how you would report it, specific locations, you can go to the Public Works Maintenance page and do a request for service. And you identify what the problem is, and that'll go to the supervisor, the people responsible, in this case, probably transportation. It wouldn't go to a maintenance supervisor. So you can request specific locations, but having funding for it is going to be the biggest issue. And I think maybe Reed should respond for the rest.
Hi, Webb. Yeah, there is no sidewalk infill program in the city of Eugene. I think that's a pretty major gap in our provision of active transportation facilities. We should be more vocal about that. You should talk to your city councilors about that. It has not been a priority for Public Works to develop a sidewalk infill program. I think that's a mistake. I wish that we would. It's a little bit more complicated than you might think, because there are folks who think that where sidewalks exist, it's because the property owner was charged to do that. If the city comes in and starts filling in gaps on their own dime, that we have ourselves an equity issue. Internally, we have a lot of debate about what the right thing to do is. And as a result of that, we have done nothing. Again, I think if there is a mandate from council that says, please get to this now, maybe something along the lines of, this is an ADA issue, this is an access issue, this seems to be a priority for increasing active mode shares, especially for people walking, that it may move up the priority list. But at this point, we do not have a program that will do that. If you call maintenance and have a sidewalk complaint, it's really about the accessibility of the sidewalk and not whether or not there is a sidewalk. So in existing neighborhoods where sidewalks are out of level, where they heave, you can go ahead and report those. Those do get fixed. Of course, there's a big backlog of how to do that. Generally, the property owner is asked to mitigate those situations. And council decided back in, I think, 2008, that they weren't going to ask property owners to do sidewalk infill, which means we need to have a program where there's some kind of subsidy to potentially buy down the cost of sidewalk infill, and that has never happened. So it's there's no easy response to this other than I think it should be a higher priority on the city's list, and we depend on the community to sort of make that known to council so that that can become a priority.
Yeah, and this is Shane. I'll just make a quick comment and I'll put this in the chat area that we are redoing the active transportation strategic plan this year, and the action item 4.4, which there are 64 action items total in the strategic plan. 4.4 talks about creating and maintaining a sidewalk infill improvement program that considers new funding sources, credits and loans, and expanded development requirements to complete missing sidewalk segments. We have sort of worked to, through Safe Routes to School grants and different project implementation, done sidewalk infill when we could, but traditionally it's been all on homeowners. And this has been something that we've wanted to do and have tried to, but in the current funding mechanisms, it's just not set up. And, that's something that, Julie has spoken in the past about, ways that items are prioritized in funding. And this is one of those areas that it's a clear example of prioritization. Alan?
Yeah, I wanted to speak up about that. Webb, I was one of the 2 people that said it would have a conversation with you about that, and I apologize, that slipped through the cracks on my part. And I'd still like to have that conversation. However, it is not any kind of short-term solution. It is definitely a long-range option. And so I will be in touch with you about that. And I think that this could be one of the items that the new communications group or subcommittee might want to take on to keep council appraised of the lack of sidewalk infill program that we don't have.
All right. We don't always respond right away to the comments because we don't always have time, but since I didn't see other hands up and because Webb brought up something that we hadn't discussed before, I wanted to just give that opportunity. So one last call if there's any public comment. Otherwise, we'll move on to the regular agenda.
I see Robert C. in the comments wants to make a comment.
Great, thank you. I'll bring him
on. Thank you, Robert Hendricks, representing Churchill Area Neighbors Executive Board and Association. Thank you for the opportunity to join in. This is my first time, and my first question is a technical one. Is there a button on my screen to mute in case my dog starts barking, or do you unmute me if I raise my hand? Otherwise I'm muted. How does that work?
Yeah, we can't hear you unless I bring you on. So when you're in the attendees area, you don't have to worry so much.
Okay, so I better talk while you can hear me. So my first question is I guess a format structure. Is it your format that you take the time during public comment to answer questions that are raised in public comment? Or do you take the questions or comments during public comment and then put them on the agenda for a future allowance of time so that those questions can be properly addressed?
Yes, usually, as I was saying to the last commenter, is usually we just take public comment for 3 minutes. But since this was an issue, the issue before was brought up before and we hadn't addressed it, I just made some time in the agenda. So usually you can make a comment and then if there's time on the agenda, the committee can decide if they want to have a discussion about it and maybe talk about it this time. But oftentimes it's something that might need further research from the committee or staff, and then we will get back to the person who left the comment or the public comment or try to answer it at the next meeting.
Gotcha, and I appreciate your flexibility regarding that. So then my suggestion or comment goes out to Webb, and I guess it's a question also, is that this subject comes up frequently in our neighborhood association meetings, both general and executive board meetings. And so I'm wondering if there's a neighborhood association in Webb's neighborhood that he can participate in or activate, because I've been on the executive board for a number of years, and my experience is that when you have a neighborhood association behind you, so to speak, the city has bigger ears, and so does the council persons, and so on and so forth. So this thing about sidewalks, as you mentioned, is very blotchy at best. And my understanding is that if it's say on a sidewalk that runs along your property, you're responsible for that lack of a sidewalk there. You have to pay for it. So the encouraging thing is that the city does have matching grants for some of these projects, and it's well worthwhile, I think, to get a neighborhood association involved in these kinds of things. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, Robbie, I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Shane. Okay, so that looks like that's it for public comments. And the next thing on our agenda is to approve last month's meetings. Anybody have any comments to make about it? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. Would somebody like to move to approve?
I'll move to approve those meeting minutes.
Thank you, Grace. Would someone like to second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Pete. All in favor? Great. Looks like we've approved the minutes, and I think we're back on schedule. Okay, so that takes us to the next part, which is, let's see here, 13th Avenue. 13th Avenue Bikeway. Am I looking at the right meetings? Are we talking about this again?
Yep, we are.
Great. Had a little deja vu for a second there, so just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, it's a big thing. So I wanted to highlight one thing, and that is to show a little video that is in its rough draft, but near completion. Show a little video about 13th, and then get a little feedback and discussion from you all about current operations, and give you an update from our traffic operations team, and sort of the latest that I've heard from Andy today about where things are. So I'm going to kick us off with this video. Hopefully I turned the sound on. Give me a thumbs down if the sound doesn't kick on here. You all see that, I assume. Sound? All right.
The 13th Avenue Bikeway is a great way to travel between the University of Oregon campus and downtown Eugene. With several Peace Health Rides bike share stations along the way, visiting local sites and businesses is easy, safe, and fun. Here are some pro tips to help get you rolling smoothly on the Bikeway. Pro tip number 1, get on the Bikeway. You can find bikes at Peace Health Rides hubs or locked to bike racks in the service area. Once you get a bike, you can get on the Bikeway several different ways. Use a bike box to cross stopped traffic. Use a crosswalk. Or just get right on. Pro tip number 2, red means stop, green means go. These bike signals use a special infrared camera to detect people in the bikeway. Remember to stop for the red bike signal and wait for it to turn green. Cars next to you might get a green before you. This prevents conflicts when the cars turn. When the bike signal is green, all the car signals are red. You can then continue along the bikeway or even turn in any direction at that intersection. Pro tip number 3, pass like a pro. As you're riding on the right side and you need to pass someone, remember to ring your bell or say, passing on your left, to the person you're passing. Pro tip number 4, choose your adventure. Use the Peace Health Rides app to find bikes and plan your trip. Which way would you choose? The 13th Avenue Bikeway gives you safe, easy access to so many great local businesses. Remember, when you get a green bike light, you can go in any direction the street goes. The choice is yours. Hop on a Peace Health Rides bike, get on the 13th Avenue Bikeway, and ride to your favorite place.
All right. What do you think? It's our draft, which I think we're making some minor tweaks and, as I said, some text, and then we'll hopefully get this out tomorrow. So we're also working with our video person on creating an overview video. So if you've seen the East Amazon video that we did for the active transportation corridor there, we're going to create one similar to that is just about that. Sort of why we built it and a little bit of history and then sort of how it fits into our system. So that's coming up as well with a little flashback. If anyone has seen the 1972 film that Ruth Bascom did about our bikeway, and there's some called Bike Links, it's a great historical video. And our video producer was really excited to see that, and she's going to put some clips in about that. And we're talking about how to do sort of the 50th anniversary, sort of what of the bike links have we done and what are we doing next kind of video. So that should be fun. So yeah, I think besides that, Reed and I wanted to open this up to a little discussion. I'll kick it off with talking about what we know from traffic operations and the next pieces that we're waiting on. And so we are still waiting on these communication pieces. Any day now, anytime. They've been on back order for a couple months. And once those communication pieces are in that allow the signals to communicate to each other and then also back to the traffic operations team, they will be able to implement some new timing that will get us closer to having not a green wave, but at least, you know, some green ripples of having some better timing. That will make it smoother. They definitely recognize it needs some tweaking and that they're working on it on that front. And having that equipment will be part of that. And then having the staff time to put those in and make those tweaks on timing. So I'll look through, I see that there were a couple of questions or comments, and I'll filter through those while ATC members talk a bit about sort of Reed, do you want to say anything, ask any specific questions?
Sorry, I was just filling in the comments in the chat box. So I responded to a few of these. As Shane mentioned, we turned this on like a week after we had the last ATC meeting. So Robbie, this might sound like a familiar topic, but it actually hadn't been on. So if you used it prior to that, you did so at your own risk. It's definitely on now. We've been getting a lot of comments from people, but I'd like to have an opportunity for ATC to comment on it as well. And if there's a great overlap in questions, Shane and Leah and I can probably respond to that with why things are the way that they are right now. And just keep in mind that this is a work in progress. Like any signal system in the entire city, we reserve the right to go back and change things. And we definitely intend to improve the signal flow for the bikeway. We are lacking communications devices that allow the signals to talk to each other. And so those have been on back order for as long as we've been doing the project. So I don't know when those are going to come in, but they are going to come in at some point. And at that point, that's going to give us a little bit more, it'll give us some more tools to address our major concern, which is that people on bikes don't want to stop at the red lights. Again, I wish you would. You could be, cited for running a red light if you do go through one. And we worked really hard at those intersections to eliminate turning conflicts. So one of the things I've noticed is that, especially like Pearl southbound, there's a separate signal phase for bikes on southbound Pearl. And if you stop during a red bike signal phase, you will not get left hooked by cars going southbound on Pearl that are then turning, east to the university. And that's by design so that we could eliminate that turning conflict. When folks decide not to follow the signals, they are putting themselves at risk. And I want you to know that that is your crash. So if you were to go through a red light, you will get cited for running a red light. If you hurt yourself, that's your bill. If you hurt somebody's car because you went through their windshield, that is your bill because you did a bad thing. You broke the law. So I understand that it can be inconvenient, but it's there for a purpose. And for folks who just want to race through different corridors, we have a variety of different route options that you might want to try. 12th comes to mind. You can pretty much go right through that. Oregon has a stop as yield law at this point. So a lot of those stop signs mean you can yield at them and maintain your momentum. It might be a good option for folks who don't want to stop. But I'd like to get people's opinion on how it's working, what you've been seeing. If there are things that you've seen that you don't think we've noticed. I was just responding to Bill Randall in the comments here. Southbound Charlton, there's a bike lane just before 13th. There was not a signal device put in the bike lane. And so his comment was, I have to wait for somebody in a car to come rescue me because there's loop detectors in the travel lane, but not in the bike lane. Yeah, so that's an oversight. I think the immediate fix there is going to be to eliminate the bike lane because it's a shared lane situation south of 13th. I've requested that there be otherwise some actuation, but that's a much bigger lift for just a signal actuation when it's a shared lane south of there anyway. So it's a similar situation to Olive Street, which is basically shared lane situation. So, one of the things I wish we had done better, and I realize I'm talking a lot and I want to give you the opportunity to talk, but at each of the intersections, we weren't necessarily consistent with signals or detection. And I think one of my big lessons here is let's try to be consistent, because at every intersection, you sort of have to know how to do something different. And I don't know that everybody knows how to do that. And I don't know that we should expect. I mean, it should be a really passive system that anybody can use without having to know what a loop detector is or where an infrared camera might be located. So I'm talking with traffic operations more about that and making sure that the system is more user-friendly. So with that, I'd love to hear your comments.
I guess I'll go first. This is something that I have noticed a couple of times. As you may know, I'm a bus rider, ride the 28 quite frequently, and it goes down 13th Avenue. And there has been twice since the thing has actually been built where an emergency vehicle or utility vehicle has been in the along the southern side of the street, and the bus has actually had to go into the hop the little curb there and go into the protected bike lane to get around said vehicles. So I imagine that at some point you guys are going to hear some complaints about that sort of situation. And it's surprising that it's actually already happened twice, and I just ride once a day. So just wanted to put that in the hopper.
Pete, was it fire engines or ambulances?
Fire. It was two. On one occasion, it was two fire trucks, and another occasion, it was utility vehicles.
So one of the features of the Bikeway is that we did make that separator mountable, and specifically for emergency services vehicles. So I'm a little concerned that buses are getting out of the way because emergency services should be passing on the left and not on the right in the travel lane. And we've had that discussion. So that's a useful comment. Thanks, Pete. We'll follow up with that.
Well, can I clarify a little bit? The fire trucks and the utility vehicles were actually parked on the south side on the curb, but in order for the bus to get around them, it had to go over the hump, as it were. Does that make sense to you?
Oh,
Yeah, I gotcha. They were
Okay.
parked, not traveling.
Not traveling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And honestly, it should be wide enough there too that there should be passage. But I'll just check in with that too. Thanks.
If I might, so I have so two things. Obviously, Shane and Reed, you did your best to head off conversations about the stops. So I'll just talk briefly. I think that people are going to do what they're going to do, and our regulations need to reflect the fact that humans are going to want to keep moving and are going to get frustrated. And this is a really important piece of infrastructure that I hope we can replicate in many, many other parts of the city. And it would just be it would be a big shame if there were a whole lot of conflict that resulted, from frustrated cyclists causing legal problems and there being crashes. We really, really don't want that. So yeah, I'm trying to think, what we can do in terms of messaging. Obviously, you say tech is coming that will improve the situation. Yeah, I'm a more aggressive cyclist than most, and so I will probably just use other corridors for the next little bit. But other people, I'm not concerned about me. I'm concerned about the next piece of infrastructure. The other thing that I wanted to say is that the pedestrian grade crosswalk at the west end of 13th Avenue is wonderful and amazing, and definitely one of my favorite pieces of infrastructure in the whole city. And I want to see about 1,000 more of them.
Reed?
I guess I'll go. Yeah, I've ridden it a few times, and I have the same comments that a lot of other people have. It's really slow. And I love having a barrier, but what I found was actually it's kind of difficult because there'll be the times I have ridden it, there has not been much traffic, and yet the light is, the bicycle light is red and it stays red. And then you've got a loaded bike with all your groceries and it's heavy, and you've kind of got to start that puppy up again instead of just being able to roll through when there's absolutely nothing there. And I have been, and it is against my nature, but I have been obeying the traffic signs because we have to, it's a good thing to do. But I'll probably, like Daniel, move to another route, which is kind of, counterintuitive. But I love the barrier, and we just need to get it to work more smoothly, which you've addressed.
Any other comments about the subject?
Yeah,
Josh,
I want to concur with Daniel that this is a really dangerous, there's some really dangerous intersections there. And I have seen and had several people, I've had 3 people call me and say, this is really a problem with people jumping the lights, that they've witnessed many, many people jumping lights and almost getting hit. And I just think someone's going to get hit. And I know that Reed, you shared your concern about future bikeways if someone gets hit on this protected bike lane. And I'm really afraid that that's going to happen. So I'm not really sure what the answer is, but it's really a problem. And I'm not really I don't think the education is the answer, because transportation systems should be designed to be safe without a lot of extra education. They should just be intuitive and safe on their own. So, gosh, I wish I knew what to do, but that's my feedback. I did have a question for you, Shane, about the video. Like, how is that going to get out into the world?
So we are going to put that out through our social media channels. And I'll send you all the link, and you can share it on your networks. And but it'll be on our YouTube channel and Facebook and Instagram, and pushed out through the Peace Health Rides channel as well. We made it as a Peace Health Rides pro tip video so that it would fit into sort of 13th and infrastructure as well as Peace Health Rides. So.
And does that get much viewership?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. We pay to boost some of our posts, and those always get more when we pay to boost them.
Okay.
Hey, Shane, really quick. Have you thought about taking the video and breaking it down into smaller bite-sized videos that's a little more appropriate for social media that are
Yeah,
like
it's one of the
15,
reasons
20
we
seconds?
did that. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we did the different pro tips is that for certain media, we're going to break them down into those little pro tip 1.
I see. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to observe, Alan, I agree that systems need to be intuitive inherently, but on the other hand, I'm thinking of, like the videos you see of the day that Sweden switched driving from the left to the right side, and just, all the chaos and, education was obviously a key piece there. That's what I observed out here was a lot of people that were used to doing things a certain way and weren't expecting everything was going to change. And to that extent, I thought the temporary signs that were up seemed to be extremely helpful. I was really pleased to see those, and there's still a lot of them are still up. And I think a few others would be helpful as well for the regular riders that typically take Pearl or take High Street. They're not expecting that red bike light. That's what I heard when I did an observation shift. I heard from riders, hey, I'm not expecting that. I need to know about it. And the other trouble site that I saw was where cars go down to one lane eastbound on 13th Street at High. There was a lot of confusion there. They just weren't expecting it. I know there's some kind of signage about that, but probably oversigning, at least temporarily, would be helpful.
I see we have a couple hands up over here. Grace?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's really snazzy. It's a lot of bike infrastructure. It really reminds me of the Oregon voter pamphlets where it contains a lot of information. I think in some ways when I'm on it as a cyclist, I did feel pretty safe, but then I felt confused by all the inputs and all the new things. It was like a lot to pay attention to. And I also found it hard to stop and start at pretty much every intersection, but I think that is a work in progress. I also noticed quite a few folks that were walking along the bike lanes and was curious if anybody else had noticed that as well.
Thanks, Grace. Josh has his hand up.
Yeah, so I actually did 6 hours of observations a few weeks ago, and I saw one person jogging, but no one walking. I did see one skateboard dog combo, which is always fun in Eugene. So I've already sent comments from my observations to city staff that basically align with what everybody else has said. But some of my thinking has evolved over the past few weeks that when we build infrastructure like this, it's for safety and comfort. And that might have to come at the price of speed. That we might, if we're building infrastructure for 8 to 80, if what we're trying to do is make it safe for the most vulnerable of users, that may mean that the most confident cyclists need to take another route and that perhaps this infrastructure isn't for them. Now, it definitely needs to be improved. It can definitely work better, but I do think we need to somewhat manage our expectations of what you get when you make something safer. I do think more education is necessary. That's something the university is going to pay a lot of attention to, especially when we resume more classes in person and we have more people commuting on this route. Because if I have a bias for my observations, it's that younger people were ignoring the lights more so than older people. And so I am concerned for the safety of students. And so I want to ensure that they understand how this infrastructure works and so can make the best choices when engaging with it. And then the final thing I wanted to note is that we're going to talk about communications later. This is one of those where City Council needs to hear about the successes of the corridor because they are going to hear a lot of the challenges. Staff already knows the challenges, but decision makers need to hear how it's working well.
So I'll
Great,
just,
thanks, Josh.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, Shane.
go ahead. Nope, you go ahead, Robbie.
Shane?
No, I just wanted to say that this is valuable input. And that we have, we set aside a good amount of time because we wanted to gather input. So, I just wanted to keep that open and keep that dialogue open. In responses to one of Grace's points, at the beginning, I didn't see many people walking it. I do have seen more. We're definitely seeing a lot of different users. And this is something that we're seeing on the East Amazon as well, is that people walking, running, skateboarding, scooting, one wheel, all of those. And I think one of the things that I brought up for a while, and one thing that we've worked on as staff and from BPAC and ATC times, is the need to review what is legally allowed on our streets and our bike facilities. And I think this is just going to raise that to a higher awareness because skateboards and scooters have always been out there, and especially around the university, but this is really concentrating them. And so hopefully that will sort of put that back on the agenda for some for some reevaluation. But other pieces on this are really helpful to hear.
I did have one question, and this might actually solve some of the left hook conflicts. Is it possible to rephase the lights, the signals, so that bicyclists go first and then turning left hand on and go second?
We lost you a little bit with some lag there, Alan, but I think we got the gist of it, of letting bikes go first before turning vehicles. And right now it's a first come, first serve. And so it's, if a car trips the loop first before you trip the camera, then the car will go first. If you trip the camera before they trip their loop, then you go first. So right now it's on a first come, first serve. Whether that can change or not, yes, I think that's something, part of the timing piece, that traffic operations is going to look at.
I think it's important to have some predictability so that on this corridor anyway, because there needs to be some consistency so that after using this several times, you know what to expect. And if each time is different, then people will get frustrated and just do what they want to be doing.
So unfortunately, there's some technology out there that hasn't been approved by the federal government yet. So there are a couple areas in town, like 5th at Blair, 6th and Monroe. I think we have one more where we have a blue light detector. So if somebody goes up onto a loop detector, it says bikes detected when light is on. There's a blue light. That's experimental. And so we've got a couple locations where we are doing that. That's in concert with PSU out of Portland as a federal study. And so I think there are other ways. Hopefully that gets done soon. And then that is allowed, where we can inform users that they have been detected. In foreign countries, they'll actually do a countdown timer that tells you how many seconds until you're going to get the green. That tends to increase compliance with the red light because they don't feel like they're going to be there for 2 minutes. They'll say, oh, it's 12 seconds. I can wait 12 seconds, that sort of thing. It's just, we're still on the front edge, unfortunately, 10 years after, the state started building cycle tracks. There's just still not a lot in the Fed manuals about it. They just sort of reference other guides and say, you can go ahead and try this stuff. The same goes for messaging on the pavement. I wanted to put something on the pavement that said, you know, bikes detected in lane, or just like a signal, and just kind of tell people where to wait. And that's all experimental. And remember, we paid for this stuff through CMAQ money and other federal funds. And so we have to use the federal guidelines when we put this thing together. That was a bit of a detriment, because I think because of the experimentalness of this facility type, we also need to have corresponding signage, signals, and countdowns that help it function better. And that technology is out there. Portland is experimenting quite a bit with it. As I mentioned, we are participating in some of those surveys as well. This thing is going to get smarter over time. At this point, I think it represents basically, I think as Josh mentioned, this is the base level optimum safety sort of condition. And what we're recognizing is that there's a high degree of non-compliance, which then erodes that safety. So what adjustments do you have to make so that you're achieving those safety outcomes, and yet, you know, working with the user experience so that they are complying. And that's what we're wrestling with right now. And as I mentioned, I think there's a lot of tools in the toolbox out there that we just can't use yet. On this project, we have to close it out. So that's part of the delay, is that we got to close out this project with the feds before we do anything local with it, with local money. So we can go back in and put in those blue lights, but we can't do that until we close this out, because we don't want to get in trouble. So be patient, please. That's another message that we're sort of getting out there, is we recognize that there are some problems, and we are going to be able to make adjustments, but it's going to take some time to do that. Hopefully by the time we build another one of these, we'll have the quirks of this one ironed out. This was always going to be a test case for us. This was always going to be a proof of concept. And I appreciate everybody telling us why it is where it is and isn't working well. It's really helping us to pin down what we need to do better. There's just some limitations to what we can actually achieve right now. And part of the nature of that is the federal government. So hopefully with a new administration and new federal funding, we'll be able to do innovation a little bit better.
I'll just note really quick too, that in talking with Andy from traffic operations, that, you know, this is the biggest infrastructure of this kind in Oregon, and really close to any in the country. And so there aren't a lot of precedents for teams like his of how best to do this. So we are definitely learning on the fly, you know, recognizing that there's a lot of other improvements to make, that, you know, the technology and just our knowledge will help. I know it's not the best way to do it always, but it's, I think, the way that we're getting it done and making these kind of innovations. So I appreciate folks' patience. I'm definitely, you know, one that needs to be reminded to be patient at times as well. But you know, I think it is pretty impressive, you know, these 22 bike signals on this corridor. It's something totally new and different, and it's going to take some adjusting to. And when Reed mentioned the countdown lights, I also thought about these, the rabbit and turtles symbols that they have in another country, where it tells you as you're riding, like, oh, if you slow down, you'll make it green, or if you speed up, you'll be able to catch this green, and things like that, that, you know, we could really do. I think that the great thing is that we have the core of it down, right? And like that alone is pretty amazing. And now we just have to make it better so that, you know, people don't feel like they have to use other corridors, that it does feel, you know, safe and comfortable. And as I mentioned before, I sent my kids on this to ride on their own, and on streets that I would not have let them ride on their own before. And so for me, that was a test of concept, right? My 10-year-olds just say, you know, ride from one end to the other, and I'll meet you on the other end, and we'll get some bubble tea. And, you know, they did it, and I didn't have to worry about it. And that right there was like, okay, you know, part of this sucks, but we can fix that. This core piece is good. Andrea and Marina, Andrea. All right.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah, hi. I had two things. One is, have there been any incidences of the people have seen where cars have not been exactly complying or been completely confused, or I'm just curious about that. And also, I know, you know, Reed said it wasn't important that there wasn't a huge ridership. I mean, that the metrics weren't the important reason for the Bikeway, but I'm curious if those are going to be tracked, if metrics will be tracked. Just to know if people are, trying it out and then just giving up and going somewhere else.
So you may have noticed some tube counters out there. So we're doing counts right now. I meant to check in with our folks who put those out today to see what the results have been, but yeah, we'll have counts real soon. And then non-compliance of drivers. So Josh, it sounds like you did 3 shifts out there. I only did 2. So I did 4 hours of observation, but I've ridden it 36 times. I haven't seen non-compliance by drivers except for the area that Steve mentioned, which is where the 2 lanes merge to 1. And that's not a non-compliance thing. That is sort of just a traffic thing. And our traffic engineers responded by going out and adding some additional striping to that area. They're discussing doing some advanced warning signs as well. There are some out there, but this is a new condition and people are still figuring it out. So I've been rather surprised. I will tell you that early on in the development of this and the construction, the reason that there are those little flexible bollards in the middle of the lane at all the intersections was not part of our design. I did not want those to be part of this, but people were turning into it. So people were turning their cars into the Bikeway, and we put those bollards there so that it looked like they wouldn't fit, and that seems to keep them out. So since we've done the construction and opened it up, I haven't seen non-compliance by automobile drivers really at all, personally.
Great. Marina had her hand raised, and then I see Josh over in the chat.
Yes, I haven't been able to participate too much with the committee, and I didn't have time to volunteer for this project. I wanted to be there, but I wasn't able. But I had been watching it because I drive through 13 and High a lot, and I also have walked through 13. And me as a driver, I want the corridor there. And I'm taking the time, I'm leaving earlier as a driver because I know I had to put more attention because of the corridor when I go on 13. And I also like the idea that there is a corridor that seems safer for the bicyclist who doesn't have much experience. If I take a friend to a bicycle ride, I will take them through there instead of feeling too intimidated to riding on a bicycle lane just next to the lane of traffic and have the feeling that they have to go faster because there may be other bicyclists on the back. But I think this gives some sense of security, of safety. And I see it as a corridor that is also family friendly. Yes, it's going to take time. It's like when I was sometimes mentioning in the committees that about the crosswalks on 13 and Jefferson Street, that I was seeing that the traffic was not respecting those crosswalks. And on 13, somebody almost hit me also when I was trying to cross. But it's getting better. One just has to learn and get used to it, and it will happen. Oh, one thing, is it legal for bicyclists to pass a red light?
No. And also just on the note really quick of the law, I don't remember if Reed mentioned this, but because of the existing Oregon law that if there's a bicycle facility, you are required to use it. The like letter of the law legal wise, you actually can't leave the 2-way bikeway and be in the vehicular travel lane to use their green light. So just so you know that the letter of the law says you need to stay in the bikeway and use the bikeway, and which means use that signal. So just to highlight that legal note. And
Josh?
I think,
Oh,
Josh, yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Josh.
I just wanted to share, I did see a pretty egregious incident of a vehicle not following the rules. It was between Patterson and Hilliard, close to the hospital. I saw a vehicle turn into the bikeway, travel westbound down the bikeway to drop someone off at the corner. And then, because there's a bollard in the way, they backed all the way back up down to Hilliard so that they could get out. I think they realized after a certain period of time that what they were doing was not correct. But, you know, vehicle drivers don't necessarily get it all at once either. But in the 6 hours I did observations plus another couple riding up and down. That was the only such incident I saw. So in general, things are pretty good.
Okay, great. We're a little bit past where we should be. Any more comments about this subject before we move on to the next part of our meeting?
I do have one quick question. Is it possible to add either polarized lights or some kind of blinder so that it's not possible to see the lights in the car travel lane from the bicycle lanes?
That's a good question. I know that maybe Ree can answer this. It is set up that way for the bikes, in that the car drivers cannot see the bike signal the way that it's set up. But you're right, it's not set up for the other way around, and I'm not sure.
So while all the signals are new, and as Shane mentioned, the technology is state of the art, so this is pretty forward compatible. I think we probably ended up reusing what are called those dog houses. So the red, yellow, green that were there are probably the same ones that used to be there. And so that's just a sort of a bulb and a lens. It's not like our new bike signals that you can actually sort of rotate a little bit. That's what they appear to be anyway, but we can definitely ask Andy if that's a thing that we could do. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that might help a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Definitely. Okay, so if there's nothing else, let's move on to the next part, which is Move Huge, which is Shane.
Another deja vu one, because I did mention this last time, but I did want to just call out, and it's fine that we're a little over on that last one because I don't have a lot on this right now. Just to give you a heads up that I'm going to throw a link into the chat, and then I'll also have Lee send it out in an email to the ATC members. But I do have a survey ready now that I would like you to commit some time to doing. It's basically 3 questions about each of the action items that we have in the strategic plan. And that is, how do you think we did on this action item? Ranking it from we didn't do well on it to we did great on this item. The next question is, where do you think we fall on the spectrum of completion for this action? From I don't know to it's totally complete. And then the last one is, what do you think we should do with this action item now? And that includes keep doing it as is, keep doing this with changes, combine this with something else, review this more in depth, take it out, or we're finished with it, and I don't have enough information on this item. And so, again, that's for all 62 action items. And you might not have any understanding of some of them, but I at least want to get a feeling for how you think we did. If you thought, I don't know anything about this, but it seems like maybe we might be somewhat complete on it, or I want to get a gauge. It's really just for me to know, for us to know where we are in these action items. Staff are going to do this same survey. ATC is gonna do these surveys, and then we're gonna have some partners do these surveys. And my goal is to sort of see where each of these action items falls on where we think we are, where the community thinks we are, and where our partners think we are. And then where they think we should go with some of these action items. So it would be really helpful. I know it is going to take you about 20 to 30 minutes to get through because again, there are 63 actions and 3 questions on each. And so I've gone through it. Hopefully you can commit the time to doing it. It would be really helpful for me in this next phase of creating our next strategic plan. I'm really excited about creating this next strategic plan. I feel like there's a lot in flux and change right now, both in transportation options in our community. We'll have in this new year, we're gonna have a new bike share operator. We're gonna have some sort of new regional transportation options program forming. I just feel like our staff is going through a work plan process right now. And there's just a lot of exciting things and possibilities. We are doing a whole traffic demand management program where we're changing a lot of policies about what we require of builders and developers. And that really connects with our transportation options of what we require them to do. And if they have to do a traffic impact analysis and they have to make some changes, what do we require of that? Some of that could be requiring bike share memberships or requiring, some TO program that we are creating. So it's some exciting times, and the ATC will be involved in this throughout. And this is sort of the first step in this next piece, is looking back and seeing what we've done and then starting to dream about what we're going to do. So I'll send that link out. Any questions or other pieces that you might have about the previous action plan? It's not required, the strategic plan, that you go back and look at that strategic plan. Each question, each action item will be in there.
Any comments or questions about this? Okay, anything else you want to add, Shane?
No, I think that's it. We got us back on track.
Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, next up, Lee's going to talk about leaf collection.
Sure. Hey, Shane, can you pull up the webpage?
Yep. 1 sec.
Okay, thank you. So the leaf collection started this week in the central part of Eugene. If you look on the map, it shows where the zones are, and then right below it, there's a table to show when you put your leaves out and when they'll be collected. You can also go and type in your address, and it'll tell you that same information. They have a safety. One of the sub pages is safety tips, and what those are is don't put leaves in bike lanes or in travel lanes. There's also 25 miles of priority bike lanes that have leaf collection issues. So there's a lot of trees that are dumping in leaves in the bike lane. And so the maintenance staff prioritizes those. And maybe at the end of the leaf season, we can go back and see if those routes or those bike lanes are still the most problematic ones. So we're doing the first round right now, and the next round won't meet till January 4th. So potentially there could be a lot of leaves out there for a while. And I know that some of my neighbors have been putting leaves out. We don't have bike lanes around where I live, but so they could go out there a little bit early. If you look at the home webpage, there's some blue buttons on the right. That's where you can report problems. The top one is request for service. And there's also a phone number above if you want to call during working hours. But you can also download iBike Huge. It's an app for Android and iPhones, and you can report them right through your phone. So if you see any issues, I would say report it. Maintenance staff is very good about going out when there's a problem. And so this is a way, because it goes right directly to a supervisor. And that's all I really have. And I encourage people to report. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
I think this is the time of year when I usually get on my soapbox and say, stop putting your leaves out in the street. If your collection time is not until December, like it is in my neighborhood, all of those leaves will end up in the stormwater system, and then the intersections will start to flood. And then we have to send crews out to unclog all the leaves instead of picking up the leaves, which is what they should be doing, which then impacts the leaf collection schedule. So then leaves end up on the ground for far too long. And then if we have a snow event, they end up underneath the snow. So if everybody would look at that schedule and pay attention to it and follow it, we would actually have a much more effective system overall, and it would just work better for everybody. I know it's hard to talk to your neighbors about it. I've done this in the past too, and I've said, the leaves aren't supposed to be out until a week before whatever the date is. And they say, well, so-and-so did it. And I was like, well, okay, but let's not do that. You might as well. And I live over by the Amazon Creek. I was like, basically what you're doing is you're raking up all the leaves from your lawn and you're dumping them into the Amazon Creek. Let's not do that. Let's do something else. Let's follow the schedule and get them sucked up and disposed of properly. Or let's use them for mulch on our own yards. If you can put them under your trees or in your gardens, that sort of thing, that's probably the best use for leaves. You can also put them in your trash hauler's yard waste bin, and they will be collected that way too. So yeah, I mean, it's such a problem, and it's a problem every year. And this, when it really starts to rain, in another couple of weeks, and people do have leaves out, everything is going to flood, and people are going to complain about it. And it's because everything's backed up with leaves that aren't supposed to be out there yet. And so just keep that in mind. That's why that's happening, and we can fix it. We just have to let folks know that it's happening.
And I'll remind, when we recreated the LEAF program several years ago, and we worked as the BPAC to have Public Works change sort of how they messaged around this. There was talk of, from sort of the advocate side of, should we stop this LEAF program? Because it's supposed to be it's all about stormwater, right? And that's why we have it, to keep our system clean. But if we're encouraging people to put their leaves out to get collected, we're encouraging more leaves to go out unless people follow the rules. Springfield requires you to bag your leaves, which I don't think we want to move towards. But we have to do something that keeps the leaves out until it's pickup time. And so having people report them helps. Just getting that messaging out to your community, to your neighbors, really helps.
Julie?
Well, major frustration with the leaf thing. I mean, I know you have these maps, I know you have these deadlines, but no, you're just not going to get people to do that. It's sort of like the bike lane thing. It's like, no, people are not going to, they're just going to put them out there. And why? About a year ago, this time last year, the mayor was doing a safety walk out by a school and noticed all the kids walking in the road because the leaves are in the, there's nowhere to go. And she said, why don't we bag them? And why don't we bag them? It just seems such a counterintuitive thing. And you mentioned, Shane, that we don't want to go with bags. Why not? Why can't we have Rexius or Lane Forest products specify the bag, which is really, really, really an important thing, or use a paper type bag and have a collection schedule that's bagged and put it on the homeowner instead of having the homeowner put them in the street, because just people just don't get it. And you can message all you like, but you're not gonna you're just not going to get there. And I just wondered, why can't we do it a different way? Seems like Springfield really has a good idea. Or tell people to put them in their yard debris. That's another one.
Yeah, and there is definitely some messaging around that. But yeah, and I definitely don't want to, I guess I shouldn't have said we're not going to go there, or however I phrase that. But I think that was when this was discussed before, it seemed like there was a lot of resistance to it because it would impact the system in some way. And so I think that it is something that is worth discussing more. But yeah. Someone in the chat asked if the waste providers are providing extra yard debris containers, or if they can, on a temporary basis to customers. Another idea. Did I see someone raise their hand? Josh.
I wanted to ask, when we report leaves in the bike lane, what is the remedy for that? They don't go and just vacuum them up. Is it like you just send a angrily worded letter to the property owner?
No, unfortunately, I think it's just the first and not the second. When we get reports of via iBike Huge app or that online piece, that goes into our bucket list, and they go out and clean them up. And so it reinforces bad behavior in some places because people are like, oh, wow, I put the leaves out there, and then a couple days later they were gone. So there's definitely some improvements that could happen there. But
Hey, Shane.
yeah.
Yes. Go ahead. Lee.
I think they changed that policy where they go and tell the people that they need to do it, and the staff won't collect it.
Oh, did they change that policy?
Because of that reason you cited.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, we tend to abate instead of sending letters. So it's just because it's guys in trucks, it's easier for us to send a truck out there than it is to find somebody to write a letter, put it in an envelope, get it in the mail, and then to have somebody on the receiving end of that if somebody has a question. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how we do it.
We've often had maintenance come usually after the leaf season to kind of give us an update. So Lee, maybe that can get on the agenda for February or something, and we can find out how it went, and Julie can ask her question about why don't we bag, and we can we can send them some questions beforehand, but maybe also asking about that policy change and how that was implemented.
I think we should do that.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognize that there are people that will purposefully put their leaves out into the street/bike lane, and then there are just places where there's trees over a bike lane and the leaves fall on their own. So then it becomes a question of, whose responsibility is it to take care of that? Is it the homeowners, or is it so it's not as clear cut as somebody just dumping their leaves into the bike lane.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. And I will put another link in the comment section as well. That is the priority bike lane cleaning history, where you can actually see when, and this happens mostly once they're really out there doing a lot more work, when the street sweepers were out, in which areas they've cleaned. And so I don't know if they've actually started that for this season or not. But that is a tool that we have as well.
Any more comments, questions, concerns about this before we move on to the next subject?
We could try enforcement rather than education.
Just to respond to that, we in the transportation department at the university do enforcement as well as education. and enforcement is not as effective as education, and just makes people angry. So that's just my opinion on the matter. You might get a different answer from someone else in my department.
Yeah, just as an alternative to stopping the program entirely when it turns out that the program is causing the system to clog more than not having the program.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what we have here with the leaf cleanup is somewhat rare in terms of other communities. I've never lived in a place, I've lived in other places. I've never lived in a place where the city comes by and cleans up the leaves. You just have to do it yourself. So yeah, I mean, there are definitely benefits about it, and we may want to make sure that we continue to keep it if we can. Okie dokie. Any last comments? Okay, next on the agenda is the Active Transportation Committee communication. And this is not led, it's just a discussion. So who would like to jump in and
I think it might be me. I mailed the topic. So to Lee's response, new committee suggestion and decision might be best wait until January when we have new members on board and are rejoining committees. But just really briefly, Steve and I and Shane a little were talking about communications committee proposed with the idea of doing two things, basically communicating with both the public, so actively reaching out and soliciting feedback on, what are the things that are important to you, what are the issues you have, and then also communicating with governmental bodies, so city council, with neighborhood associations, that sort of thing. We've kind of put together kind of an outline of the purpose of the committee and how it would work in terms of like how much advocacy would we be doing and how would we make decisions about what topics to bring and what topics to solicit. And then also we started a list of topics to work with. So if anyone else is interested in contributing to that, I'd be happy to share that with you. I didn't want to just send it to everyone because we'll probably talk about it in January.
Pete?
Yeah, I'd be interested in that. Yeah, do send it along.
Same.
Okay, I'll just share it with everybody.
So I guess since we're on this topic of communications, one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is how to make communications and public involvement fun. Like, how do we make it really easy to testify for city council or to communicate with your local elected officials? Because even us, people who are actively on a government subcommittee committee thing, aren't always going out of the way to do it. And it's not always easy or fun or convenient. And so I'm really excited about thinking about creative ways to make it easier to get people involved in things.
Any more communications about communications? Okay. Okay, so next is the ATC recruitment update. Presentation and feedback. Was somebody making a presentation on this?
I'll go ahead and start. So there's going to be up to 7 vacancies on the Active Transportation Committee. 2 people that have left, Robbie and Bob, are going to term out, and Nick and Marina have decided that they're not going to continue on for a second term. And so we just started this recruitment this last week. There's an online application on the Active Transportation Committee webpage, and people can fill it out. We have already received several. Some of the people that are on the meeting tonight have applied. So it went out in motion. That's probably the best way we get out to over 3,000 people. Social media, we've already started, but I'm going to be, tomorrow in the afternoon, I'm going to be going to a lot of lists that I have from past years and sending that out. So we'll recruit in a lot of different ways. I always ask the committee to talk to people they know that might be good members and encourage them to apply. People have until November 27th to apply. And then in early December, we'll have interviews, and then we'll select the committee, the new members, and do orientation. And when someone applies, I always tell them about the meeting so they can watch it to see what it's like and decide whether they really want to submit applications. So they'll be starting in January. That's it.
Thanks, Lee. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead. So every year so when we try to do this, when we try to recruit, we ask folks to use their networks to let folks know that, we have positions available. We do our best to do outreach, and Lee mentioned a number of channels that we use to do that. We try to get a good age range, a good gender or gender identity mix. And we work towards, some kind of racial mix. That has been really challenging for us. So if you have avenues to reach into organizations that you think are not represented on this committee, I urge you to try and do that, or just send us a notice so that we know who we should be talking to, because we tend not to get a full representation of the community on this committee, and we work really hard to do that. One of the ways that we do selection is through geographic equity. So we'll get 3 applications to 1 of South Eugene folks, and so we have to be very selective about that, for example. But we tend not to get people of color. We tend not to get a lot of young folks. So we can be doing a better job, and so it occurs to me we're not doing well enough. So I'm definitely interested in people's opinions about how we can be more effective with our outreach.
Hey, Reed, on that, are there particular regions in the city that you're finding it hard to find people from that we should maybe try to reach out more toward than others?
Yeah, well, I'm sad to see Nick go, because Nick was our Bethel representative, and we always have a hard time getting folks from far west or Bethel. We have a pretty good mix of Santa Clara River Road right now. South Eugene is always available. We get folks from the university area. But yeah, folks over sort of on the west side, or even in the hills somewhat, I think we could use some representation there. And then I think it's about how do we get folks who don't look like me talking about their walking and bicycling experience, because I hear from people who look like me a lot and not from people who don't. So we've recognized that as a gap, and I think as a city we're trying to do a better job of outreach, and we're exploring those channels, as I mentioned. But if you know some folks, we would love to consider those candidates and be able to have a conversation.
I will just say on that note, I know that there needs to be some kind of application and review process, but I do find the whole one for this committee to be pretty intimidating or cumbersome. I mean, it was kind of a whole lot to submit that formal application and be interviewed and that whole thing. So just to keep that in mind, if you're looking at equity in particular, looking at that process and how it might be a barrier for some folks.
Great. Any more comments about this? Okay. Next up is subcommittee reports. We have two subcommittees. Which one would like to go first?
Steve, can you get us?
I was just going to say, I think, you know, Dan's summary of kind of our discussion about the communications subcommittee kind of covers what we talked about in the programs meeting. That I think that pretty much wraps up everything we've done this month, unless I'm missing something.
Move huge a little bit. Yep.
Right. So that's it.
Yeah, and I'll just say for the program subcommittee that, you know, I think that subcommittee has really, you know, with the change from programs to communications, I think it's good that we're having that conversation. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of programs going on, and there wasn't a lot that the programs subcommittee could engage in during these COVID times. So I think that it's a good transition, and I appreciate especially Daniel and Steve's efforts to work on making that transition for that committee. So thanks.
Actually, can you clarify that? Are we proposing to replace the program subcommittee with the communications subcommittee, or was it going to be an additional?
Well, I think it's TBD. I think that the new ATC with all the new members will help decide what the structure of the new subcommittees will be. I'm guessing infrastructure subcommittee will stay, as that's a very important continuation piece and evaluation for pavement bond and whatnot. But I think that the programs and communication needs to be defined as far as what continues there.
Thanks, Shane. Speaking of infrastructure, does someone want to share what the infrastructure subcommittee did?
I can, if absolutely no one else wants to speak. I feel like I do it too much, though. So
You're good at it, Josh.
Well, thanks for saying so. We discussed some funding that we got for, I believe they're Safe Routes to School projects that I will let Reed talk about in project updates or whenever is appropriate, because he does it better. We also discussed the crossing at its 4th and I don't know what, coming off the DeFazio Bridge over by the eWeb property, and how that will interact with the new development going on there, and what's the safest way for people coming off the DeFazio to end up on westbound 4th Avenue. And our discussion was kind of like, there's no great way, which is an unfortunate situation, but we provided some suggestions to Reed, and hopefully there are things he can do with that. What did I miss?
That was more than I remembered from the meeting. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Maybe this would be a time for me to follow up from the previous infrastructure subcommittee meeting where we were talking about lighting projects, and Reed wanted to get some feedback about where it might be best suited to focus funding for new lighting along multi-use paths, shared use path. And so I had offered to lead a evening ride so that we can evaluate like how one segment compares to another. And so I'm interested in seeing a show of hands of Anyone else who might be interested in going out after dark? Not too late, just to go check out the circumstances all at the same time so we can compare them and then be able to make a more informed recommendation. So anyone else interested in, okay, Robbie and Reed and Nick. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this time of year, it's dark at 5:30, so it wouldn't have to be too terribly late. So I think it's doable this time of year rather than, like June or something like that.
Okay, I'll be in touch with the three of you, and I think 4 hours is probably a good number of people for this project. So thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. Next up on the agenda is project updates / info share. Who would like to go first? I see Reed's hand.
Yeah, so Alan just mentioned it, but I did want to let you folks know that we are potentially getting some funding very soon. It's not necessarily public yet, but we're very excited about the possibility of being able to do some things next year and the year after that we had hoped to do for a long time now. One of the challenges we have in River Road, Santa Clara, as folks who live there know, is that there's not necessarily a complete street there with sidewalks and gutters and everything else. And so you sort of have to find ways to make separated and safe space for folks to feel comfortable walking. And so we're looking at some different options to do that and potentially have some state funding to try something out. So as soon as I can officially announce that, I will. There's going to be some cool projects coming up though. And so I'm pretty excited about our ability to provide a range of services on streets where we would normally not try to do anything because it doesn't meet our standards per se. But big shout out to people who've been working on the neighborhood plan up there and saying, hey, we need to do what we can in the interim. There's no perfect here. I just want access. So try to get me that as soon as you can. So hopefully we're being responsive to that. And I think the state is understanding that innovation means sometimes trying new things. So I'm very happy that we're potentially going to get some innovation money to do some cool stuff. So I'll let you know what that stuff is very soon.
Thanks, Reed. Shane messaged me that he's got some things that he wanted to share.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an update on the Peace Health rides, finding a new operator. So, we did the RFI, request for information, and then we are inviting 4 of those submissions to submit a request for proposals. So we put out that RFP yesterday, and so we should be, or I guess it was Tuesday, should be receiving those RFPs are due December 10th. And then with our partners, we will review those and make a decision before the end of the year, and then work with whoever we decide to take over operations in late winter, early spring, February, March time to take over the operations, and we will keep portions, and part of that will be dependent on what they propose and what we think is a worthwhile proposal. So just want to give you all that update. It's running smooth. We've got some interesting pieces that could fall into place with that. And we also received from sort of the in the weeds back-end operations piece, we received some new controllers that we're going to try out. So instead of the push button controllers, we'll have some that you can interact with an app or with a card without having to push buttons. It should have better functionality. The old ones, the push button ones, are 2G. And so the new ones are faster and are upgraded to be compatible with 4G technology, and should just provide a better user interface. So that's good. All of those changes will sort of happen at a really similar time as far as transitioning to a new operator and getting some of these improvements in. Hopefully that will coincide with U of O getting back into session or more movement by bike being possible, and we can start to ramp up ridership again. So just wanted to give that little update.
Thanks, Shane. Okay, who else has something to share? Marina?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to be leaving the committee, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be involved somehow. So I will still in the future volunteer for any of the city activities, events. And when things get better, and now I am dedicating more my time to my job and secure my economical future and my art. And so I have taken part of the PAC committee, the Public Art Committee of the city. So I'm still working with the community, but I just want to let you know that I will still be volunteering in your events and probably next year work on the right of silence and get back, start the communication again with the people involved with this, because I took a break. Yes, so it was a pleasure working. I wish I would have done better, but maybe I'll come back in the future. Yes.
Great, thank you, Marina. Got a couple more hands. Josh?
I actually had a question for Shane on the bike share RFP, or actually adjacent matter. Where is the city on potential e-scooter pilot?
So we are still, as far as I know, planning to do something in the spring for an RFP. We are also open to, in this RFP process, we made it clear that if they want to add something about scooters into their multimodal plan and their discussions of how other micromobility might fit into their bike share operations, we'd be open to hearing about that. So there is, that potential to work within this system, and that might affect what decisions we make in the spring. But we are currently moving ahead with thinking, with this RFP in the spring.
Thanks, Josh and Shane. Steve?
Yeah, I have two questions, two totally unrelated questions, and I'm not sure who they're for. I'm going to guess Reed, maybe it's you. The first is about Webb's question in the beginning, the gaps in sidewalks in the developed areas of the city. Do we have a fairly do we have a good gap analysis for that? Or is that quantified pretty well?
Yeah, we have a complete database in our GIS.
Okay. And my second question is, I live up in a neighborhood that's close to 30th and Spring, and I've always, I huff up the hill up 30th Avenue, but I've always thought, gee, there's so many people that I think would come up here if they had access to Spring Boulevard, because 30th is so steep. If only Spring went through, alongside the Ribbon Trail there. And I noticed this year that they are actually building a subdivision. Spring Boulevard is actually being built, but I don't think it's going through. And I wonder if that is in any way on the radar for active transportation network, making that connection for Spring from, say, Hendricks Park up the hill.
Yep, we required it. So we conditioned it as part of that subdivision approval that there's a connection to Spring Boulevard, and it's in our TSP. So there was a number of different paths that we had sort of thrown in there. So depending on what their phasing is, we'll have more connections sooner than other connections. But yeah, that's absolutely something and plus that's the Ridgeline Trail right there too. So there's a trailhead there. And so that connection has to be there. And what we've requested is that in addition to the soft surface trail to the Ridgeline, that there's also an ADA accessible path or access way that connects that together. And so I'm not sure what that design is. I haven't seen it in a long time. I feel like they might be doing some of the stuff just north of 30th Avenue, east of Spring first, before they sort of get back into the Spring area. But you might be interested to know, Steve, too, that, and we can probably have Lane County on when we get a little further into this process, that we are working with Lane County to scope out what a path on 30th Avenue would look like that connects 30th Avenue where the sidewalk is wide, sort of at University Street, and then it ends at Agate all the way to the university. And so I think Shane just brought up there that purple line that says 30th Avenue, that's been in our TSP for a very long time. That says, how do we make this an all ages and abilities connection? Because there aren't sidewalks out there. We had a lot of pedestrian fatalities a number of years ago, and there's just not a good connection there. So we actually have the money now. We have a consultant on board, and we will be scoping what that could look like, whether that's a protected side path on one side, whether it's protected spaces on both sides, whatever that is going to look like. We're going to get planning analysis from that. We're also going to get like a preliminary design so that we can start to go after grant money. So that process is, I think, just underway, because I think they just bid it, and I think they have a consultant on board. So I'll have updates on that as soon as we hear more from Lane County. And I'm on the Technical Advisory Committee for that too. So I'll be able to report out on it.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. It's really great. Everything you said is music to my ears. So thanks for your foresight on that.
And I'll just highlight in this transportation system plan map, which I should just have as the back of my wallpaper, because this is a great map to pull up whenever you want to think about our system. Purple dots here are shared use paths. Red dots are proposed. Red dots are protected bikeways. And so you can see East Amazon, done. So pull up this map, and when you have those kind of questions, and it's great of like, are we thinking about this? This shows what we are thinking about, and hopefully getting done. But
all right, that's great news. Steve, did you have more to say, or is that just from earlier? Okay, anybody else? Any final last words? Any parting words? Sounds better than last words. Okay, thanks everybody. See you in a month.
Thanks, y'all.
great. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.